was recently called to a property to examine some trees. Upon walking to the property, I noticed this absolutely magnificent northern red oak. Upon closer examination, I noticed that the root system had been damaged from recent construction on the property. There was a lot of disturbance to the soil and disturbance to the roots. Upon closer examination, I noticed that there was some recent pruning work done to the lower limbs of the trees, done by untrained professionals, that actually caused damage to the tree's health. Upon looking higher into the canopy, I saw that there was some recent storm damage that occurred from the recent storms. Upon closer examination, I noticed that insects and diseases were beginning to impact the health of this tree because of its weakened state. This condition that I just described to you exists to a certain degree in most of our landscape trees and the trees and shrubs around our house. Today, I want to share with you some of the conditions that exist in our landscape trees with the hope of giving you some knowledge of how to diagnose your trees and shrubs to help make them healthier. My talk is divided into 3 parts. The first part is going to be disease. The second part is going to be insects. And the third part is abiotic. Don't worry about the term abiotic. I'll explain that later on in the talk. The first disease we have is a disease called anthracnose. It's a disease that affects the foliage of the trees. It usually happens early in the spring when the rains and the coolness and the wetness exist in our environment. There are many trees that are affected by anthracnose disease. One of the most common ones is our American dogwood. Anthracnose is ravishing to the American dogwood. This slide here is a picture of the dogwood leaf unaffected by anthracnose. Notice how green and tender and succulent the green tissue is on the dogwood. When the leaf is infected with anthracnose disease, it has a brownish, kind of purplish coloration. The edges of the leaves tend to be crinkled and curled, and it takes on the appearance shown here. When anthracnose gets very severe, it actually begins to cause dieback of the tip of the branch, as you can see in this slide here. When it gets to this state, dogwood anthracnose could be very devastating to this tree. The second tree that's affected by anthracnose is our northern red oak. Uninfected tissue, leaf tissue, looks kind of like this. It's green. It has beautiful tender foliage. It's no effect at all of the disease. Infected tissue looks like this. It's crinkled and curled. The edges are gnarled and necrotic. Notice the spotting on the leaf tissue. For northern red oak, this disease is ravishing. As you can see, if you compare the 2 leaf sizes, the uninfected leaf has basically 100% of its tissue available for photosynthesis. The infected leaf has nearly half the amount of tissue available to keep the tree healthy. Dogwood anthracnose and northern red oak anthracnose are controllable diseases. There are programs that are available that can treat this disease to help these trees mitigate or eliminate these diseases completely. The next tree is sycamore anthracnose. Sycamore anthracnose, you can see here, the uninfected leaf is very green, succulent, very similar to the other trees. Infected leaves, again, have the gnarling, the crinkling, the curling, the browning of the leaf tissue. And as I showed you with the northern red oak, half of the leaf is basically gone, non-functional. This can severely impact the health of the sycamore tree. There are treatments that are available for sycamore anthracnose. There's an infusion process where you actually passively allow the technical product to be brought in through the base of the tree, and it's taken up passively and distributed throughout the tree. It takes 3 to 5 years for this process to be completely mitigate the likelihood of getting sycamore anthracnose, but it will always have anthracnose to a certain degree, even after therapy. The next disease I want to talk about is vascular disease. In people, we have vascular problems. We may have hardening of the arteries, where the blood flow in our arteries cannot move readily. In trees, similar conditions exist. If you notice in this slide, the blackened tissue that you see in that cross-section of the stem is actually the disease. It is in the wood, causing less movement of goodies from the roots to the top and from the top to the roots. That blackened tissue that you see there is actually the disease causing the problem with the tree. Our first tree that catches vascular disease is our elm tree, the Dutch elm disease. This tree here is located right here in Pleasantville on Eastview Avenue. I call it my Schwartz elm tree. Notice the house compared to the tree. Just absolutely unbelievable this tree is. Probably one of the nicest elm trees I've ever seen in my life. But it is under therapy for elm treatment, and we've done all we could to keep this tree healthy. When elm trees have the vascular disease, as you can see in this picture, it begins to show flagging. If you notice at the tippity top of that tree, there's a yellow branch that's kind of stands out amongst the green foliage. That's a symptom of Dutch elm disease. The yellow on the bottom right-hand side of the tree is also symptomatic. We call it flagging symptoms of elm trees. This tree is in an early state of decline. As years go on and years go by, the disease will continue to build up in the tree and cause necrosis. The infusion process for Dutch elm disease is similar to what we use for the sycamore tree. It's a passive process. It does not eliminate the disease. It only suppresses the disease. So it's real critical that if you have an elm tree on your property that's uninfected, very important to probably start the whole infusion process right away to begin to get the material taken up into the tree to help mitigate the likelihood of catching Dutch elm disease. Verticillium wilt is another vascular disease that we deal with in our trees, and you've probably seen it in Japanese maple. Here's a picture of a healthy Japanese maple. Beautiful tree. I have one of these in my front yard. Nice burgundy, reddish foliage. Just a real highlight of any landscape that we come across. An infected tree will look something like this, where you begin to see major branches dying back, and you'll see sparse, sporadic, still live branches in the tree. A tree that has, a Japanese maple tree that has verticillium wilt is probably not going to live. As the other two vascular diseases I talked about are controlled, we have ways to control it. Verticillium wilt in Japanese maple is uncontrollable. Once a tree catches it, it's probably eventually going to die from that disease. I talked about treatments for trees and how to fix these problems. One of the most important things, and I can't emphasize it enough, is to make sure your trees are healthy. If you get them on a regular fertility regime where the trees keep their nutrition intact, they're better able to fight a lot of these diseases based on being healthy. Again, very similar to people. if you're in good shape, you eat right, and you're healthy, you will better be able to deal with problems that come across your life. Exact same thing with trees. When a tree is healthy, it's able to fight off a lot of these adverse conditions. The second area I wanted to talk about is insects. The biggest pain in the neck insect that I deal with on the landscape is boxwood leaf miner. My first slide, the upper left-hand corner, shows boxwood with uninfected. It has nice green, lush foliage. If you look at the slide underneath it, those are leaves that are infected with the boxwood leaf miner. All leaves have two layers, an upper layer and a lower layer. This insect is intelligent, absolutely ingenious. What it does is it lays its eggs in between the two layers of leaves, the upper layer and the lower layer. The eggs hatch out, and it's in a world of nutrients and goodies. And once the eggs hatch and the caterpillars begin to feed, they eat the entire inside of the leaf out. This next slide shows the inside of the leaf with the caterpillars inside there. Those caterpillars are probably a little longer than a pinhead, and they just have a good old time eating all the goodies inside the leaf and making it look yellow and necrotic. This is a very easy insect to control. There are systemic treatments that are available that you can inject in the soil that are taken up, again, passively by the tree that kill the insect and do a really, really good job in controlling the boxwood leaf miner. The next insect is a new insect in our landscape. It's called the viburnum leaf beetle. It's been around a few years. If you have any native viburnums on your landscape, you've probably experienced viburnum leaf beetle. If your viburnums look like the picture on the left, where they're all holes and riddled and look like little bite marks, that's the viburnum leaf beetle. I have some native viburnum on my landscape, and I'm dealing with this insect each year. If you look on the right-hand slide, you can see the picture of the insect. It's a little black larvae that gets on the bottom side of the leaf and just takes little bite marks out of the leaves and chews. If this is left uncontrolled, it can devour a viburnum plant within probably 4 to 5 days to a week. So it's real important that if you see this insect, to try to get some control done. Again, there's very simple methods you can use to control this insect. There are some very benign technical products that you can treat the foliage with. The systemic treatment that you use for the boxwood leaf miner also works with the viburnum leaf beetle. The next insect is called the emerald ash borer. And this is an insect that's been in the news for a while now. You've probably heard about it. What it looks like is it looks like this green, golden green, silvery beetle with a hardened shell. Relatively, it's about 3/4 the size of a penny. This has been introduced in our area recently. We think it came over from Japan or Korea on some lumber, on timber, and it has just gone crazy in our country. The goal of the emerald ash borer is to eliminate white ash in North America, and it's doing a really good job at it. One of the things to look for in emerald ash borer is D-shaped exit holes. If you have ash trees on your property, and you see this D-shaped exit hole as shown in this slide, probably have the insect somewhere in your vicinity. We are kind of going crazy trying to monitor this insect because we don't know where it's going to show up next. It's been showing up, it reared its head somewhere north of the Catskills, and we're just really scared that it's going to start working its way down into Westchester. So what we've been doing is we've been using traps to monitor this insect. And you've probably seen these purplish traps on trees in the summertime. Those purplish traps are methods that we use to monitor this insect to see if it's in the area. But if you do see anything that looks like the emerald ash borer on your property, you must contact the Department of Environmental Conservation immediately. The next insect is the hemlock woolly adelgid. Again, this is a new insect to our area, relatively new. It came into our country in 1938, the World's Fair, in the Japan display. These are hemlock needles that are uninfected with the insect. Again, nice green, tender, succulent needles. When the insect is on the plants, it leaves this whitish cast on the underside of the leaf, on the needles. If you notice each one of those white woolly masses, each one of those white woolly masses is a single insect. That insect has the potential of producing 300 to 500 eggs each year. So you can see that this insect is ravishing our American hemlocks. On the landscapes, we can control this insect. The systemic treatments that I've been talking about control it very easily. A lot of the oil technical products will control this insect very easily. The problem we have is our poor hemlocks growing in nature. We have no way of controlling them. No way at all. Hemlock grows in stands that are kind of rough and rugged and hard to get to. And we are losing our hemlocks annually by the thousands because of this pest insect. There are methods we're using to try to introduce native predators, but it's very slow and not working too well. So if you see this insect on your hemlocks, very important to get something done about it so they don't die. The next insect you're probably fairly familiar with is the lacebug on Andromeda. Here's an Andromeda leaf that's green, succulent. Notice the white flowers coming out in the springtime. It'll be in a few more months we'll be seeing these. Leaves that are infected with the lacebug look more like this: yellow, mottled, necrotic. Again, the leaf in the plant is in a weakened state. The entire plant is vulnerable to other secondary insects and diseases. The lacebug actually is a little tiny lace-winged insect that you can actually see around the end of June to early July, and has kind of a lacy leaf. It's probably about the size of a small coin, but it does do a really good job in ravishing the leaves on the plant. This is a very easy insect to control. Timing is critical. To control the timing of the lacebug, you usually have to time it around the end of June to early July, but it is a controllable insect. Third area is abiotic conditions. And I wanted to start out with talk about pruning. Here's a tree that's pruned improperly. You see, each tree has what's called a branch collar, kind of like the collar on my shirt, where it comes up and covers my neck. Most people who don't know how to prune trees cut the collar off completely, which is totally wrong. Here's a picture of a tree that's pruned properly. If you notice the collar on the tree, like the collar on my shirt, and that branch collar is important to remain intact because it has natural hormones that help the wounding process occur, because each pruning cut is a wound, but when it's done properly, the tree is better able to deal with that injury. Many people come in and they cut a branch off and it rips the entire end of the branch off, as seen in this slide. It's kind of like a hangnail on your finger where you pull it and it just rips and tears. Totally improper. The proper way to prune is showing in this slide, called the 3-point method. If you notice number 1, you make an undercut. Number 2, you make a top cut, and you cut completely through the branch, and that undercut, number 1, will prevent what's happening in the left-hand side, where it rips the branch off like a hangnail. And then your third cut would be your collar prune right outside the branch collar, as we saw in the previous slide. If you use the 3-point method for pruning, whether you're pruning small trees, shrubs, or large trees, you will not rip that branch. Don't top trees. I'll repeat, don't top trees. Topping trees is the easiest way to kill a tree. I wish there was arborists in this room to hear me, because you can't top trees. What happens when you top trees is you create courts for infection, as seen here. B is a plant, is a tree that's been topped. When a tree is topped, it produces 5, 6, 7, 8 little tiny branches in a response to the topping process. As courts of infection begin to work its way into that large round cut at the top, they work their way down into the wood. Those 5 to 6 to 7 little branches turn into big branches as time goes on. The infection continues to spread. The branches continue to get bigger. And what ends up happening is this. It's a mess. All those branches are going to break in time, become very hazardous. The decay is going to continue, and the tree will become a very hazardous tree. And eventually, topped trees will have to be removed. Don't top trees. We've all seen this. I call it volcano mounds. It's where the gardener comes in unknowingly and builds up at the base of the tree this volcano. This is a death threat for trees. Mulch is important. Mulch is very beneficial. It insulates the roots. But when you mound it up, as shown in this picture, you actually are causing the tree to die. Because what happens is the tree becomes lazy. It doesn't root deep. The roots stay up inside that mulch mound, and they're now susceptible to winter conditions, to summer conditions, heat, and it's just a death threat for trees. Another thing I've seen is improper planting. This is a photograph. I was called on the property to look at these 3 trees. The 2 in the back are two blue Atlas cedar that are very healthy. And the one in the front, for some reason, wasn't doing well. So the woman asked me to figure out what's wrong. I took my little arborist bag out, as you can see in the photo, that little blue bag, got on my hands and knees, dug away the volcano mound, and found that the gardener forgot to take the little baling twine from the neck of the tree when he planted it, and it totally girdled the tree. I think this tree never made it. It was just too far gone. This is a photo of winter desiccation. This is another condition that exists in the winter time. If you notice here, this is along the street. The brown tissue that you see on the street side was very susceptible to winter wind conditions. Desiccation is very similar to us getting chapped lips, and there are treatments that are available for this. Just like we put lip balm on our lips, there are anti-desiccant treatments that you can do to help mitigate the likelihood of windburn. Girdling roots. If you see a tree that has these type of symptoms where you have dieback, thinning, but the tree still looks somewhat healthy, it's probably girdling roots. Whenever I come to a landscape and I see a tree in this condition, I don't look up, I look down. And I look at the root collar of the tree, and I look for girdling and circling roots. What they are roots that look kind of like, if you notice in that picture, at the base of the tree, there's a root that's wrapped tightly at the base of the tree. That man's hand is just above the girdling root. And what ends up happening is roots are supposed to grow at an angle of 90 degrees away from the base of the tree. Well, many times, for some reason, the tree begins to circle around the trunk of the tree. And as the tree gets fatter and fatter and fatter in diameter, and the root gets fatter and fatter and fatter in diameter, the root begins to choke the tree and strangle it. If untreated, girdling roots will eventually kill the tree, as we saw in the previous slide. But there are ways that you can fix that. It's called root collar excavation. And if you see in this slide, we actually took that root and cut it away from the trunk of the tree and excised it away so it wasn't strangling and girdling the tree. This was done, on this particular tree was done about 3 years ago, and this tree is absolutely thriving. It's just a beautiful, beautiful specimen of a tree. In conclusion, what I'd like to just say is, by understanding the conditions that exist in trees, as I described in my presentation today, you'll have a better feel for understanding why trees do what they do. The conditions that I described today exist in most of the trees and shrubs around our homes. By being better able to diagnose and understand the conditions that exist in our landscape trees, you too will be better able to help our landscape trees. Thank you.